When you've got a franchise where the smallest guys are already the size of a car, you know the big ones are going to get ridiculous. We're talking Planet Eaters, living cities, and combiners that make skyscrapers look like action figures. Today we're ranking the 12 biggest Transformers ever by sheer physical scale, and we're starting with the one that makes entire worlds look small, Unicron, a planet that turns into a robot. That's the pitch. That's what someone sat down, looked another human being in the eye, and said out loud in a meeting. And somehow, everyone in that room just nodded and went along with it. The result is Unicron, the single largest Transformer in the entire franchise, and one of the most absurdly scaled characters in fiction, period. Here's the thing about Unicron. His size isn't just big, it makes your brain stop working big. In the original 1986 animated film, his approach dwarfs moons, space stations, and Cybertron itself. He doesn't enter a solar system. He replaces part of it. Fan estimates of his G1 planetary diameter land around 12,700 kilometers, which is roughly Earth-sized. That alone should be enough to make any conversation about scale feel pointless. But it gets worse. In the Marvel Comics continuity, Cybertron is roughly the size of Saturn. Saturn, the planet with the rings, the one that could fit 764 Earths inside of it. And Unicron is approximately Cybertron's equal, pushing some incarnations toward diameters above 300,000 kilometers. That's several times larger than Jupiter. He's not a planet at that point. He's a small solar system that happens to have arms. But the detail that really melts your brain comes from the aligned continuity, specifically Transformers, Prime. In that version of the story, Unicron literally is Earth's core. Not hiding inside Earth, not sleeping under Earth. He is the core. His body, curled into a spheroidal mass, has a physical radius of approximately 3,485 kilometers. And when he starts to unfold, his arm span would approach or exceed the thickness of Earth's entire mantle. So every time you've looked at the ground, you've been standing on a sleeping god made of metal, which is, not ideal. And here's where the scaling gets genuinely funny. In that same Transformers, Prime continuity, Unicron can generate avatar copies of himself from the Earth's surface. Ground-born duplicates that walk around and fight the Autobots directly. Each one stands almost 200 feet tall, enormous by normal Transformer standards. Optimus Prime would barely reach their kneecap. But compared to Unicron's actual planetary body, those 200-foot avatars are like skin cells. They're nothing. They are to Unicron what a single eyelash is to you. The franchise essentially uses Unicron's size like a volume knob. Need cosmic horror? Zoom out to the planet. Need a ground-level fight? Spawn a 200-foot clone? Need to destroy an entire civilization? Just have him show up and open his mouth. The scale varies wildly depending on the continuity. G1, Aligned, Unicron Trilogy, IDW, Marvel. They all treat his physical size differently, and none of them agree on exact numbers. But every single one agrees on the same fundamental point. Unicron is so large that the word large stops being useful. Nobody in the Transformers universe looks at Unicron and thinks we can take him. They look at Unicron and start writing their wills. But as impossibly massive as Unicron is, there's one entity in the franchise designed to match him, blow for blow, his literal cosmic counterpart, Primus. So we just covered Unicron, the planet-sized chaos god who eats worlds for breakfast. Naturally, he has a brother, because even cosmic horrors need family drama. Primus is Unicron's counterpart, his equal and opposite. He's the creator god of the Transformers, the reason any of them exist at all, and his grand strategy for defeating Unicron was becoming a planet, specifically becoming Cybertron. The entire homeworld of the Transformers is, depending on which continuity you're reading, either built around Primus or literally as Primus, right down to the core. Here's the thing, if Primus is Cybertron, then fan estimates place his diameter somewhere in the 10,000 to 15,000 kilometer range, a body comparable to Earth. That alone would be enough to put him near the top of any list. But here's where it gets complicated. Unlike Unicron, who is stuck in one dimension at a time like the rest of us, Primus can exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously. He's not just planet-sized. He's planet-sized in potentially every reality at once. That's not a god who became a planet. That's a god who became several planets and somehow kept one consciousness running across all of them. And yet, despite all of this cosmic theological weight, you can buy a toy of him. The Cybertron Primus figure stands just over 12 inches tall, a multi-dimensional creator deity, the living soul of an entire civilization's homeworld, and he fits on your shelf between Optimus Prime and a coffee mug, which is, not ideal for his dignity. The real debate in the community isn't whether Primus is big. Obviously, he's big. He's a planet. The argument is whether Cybertron is his body or his shell. If Primus is the planet, every mountain and city on Cybertron is part of him. If Cybertron is just built around him, his actual size could be significantly smaller. Different continuities answer this differently. and nobody can agree. But at least Primus chose to be a planet. The next entry on our list didn't get a choice about being enormous, and honestly, that might be what makes him scarier. Trypticon. Trypticon is a Decepticon who turns into a dinosaur, a battle station, and an entire city. And not like a small city. A city with roads, docking bays, weapons emplacements, and enough internal real estate that smaller Decepticons can literally drive into his body, park on his platforms, and set up shop inside his compartments like he's a mechanized shopping mall that also kills people. Here's the thing about Trypticon that makes him genuinely hilarious from a design standpoint. His official scale is described as variable. That's not me being vague. That is the actual canonical description. The writers, the artists, the animators, they all looked at each other across decades of Transformers media and collectively decided, we don't know how tall he is either. Sometimes he's 2 times the height of a normal Transformer. Sometimes he's 3 times. Sometimes he's whatever the scene needs him to be. Which is, not ideal for anyone trying to do math. But what they did commit to is that he's always massive. His dinosaur mode isn't dinosaur-sized in any real-world sense. Forget the T-Rex comparison. Trypticon is closer to Godzilla than anything that actually walked the Earth. He towers above buildings, spans lengths that would make paleontologists weep, and stomps around like a kaiju who filed his taxes wrong and decided to take it out on a city block. The Titan-class Trypticon figure from the Generations line stands about 18 inches tall. That's roughly 45 centimeters of pure plastic Decepticon hatred. One of the largest Decepticon figures ever produced. And in city mode, the thing sprawls across your shelf like it owns rent. But forget the numbers for a second. The real way to understand Trypticon's scale is experiential. He's not just big, he's an environment. Other characters exist inside him. They navigate his hallways, launch from his bays, and fire weapons that are literally built into his skeleton. He's less giant robot and more living aircraft carrier wearing a dinosaur costume. Nobody asked for that, but here we are. But at least Trypticon is only one city. The Autobots have their own city bot, and he makes Trypticon look like a studio apartment. Metroplex. Metroplex is the Autobots' answer to Trypticon, and unlike a lot of characters on this list, he actually comes with receipts. His tech specs list him at 200 feet tall. That's roughly 61 meters, or about the height of a 20-story building. So if you've ever stood at the base of a decent-sized office tower and looked straight up, congratulations, you've experienced the Metroplex perspective. Except the building doesn't usually transform and start shooting at you. But here's where it gets fun. His lifting capacity is listed at 70,000 tons. To put that in terms your brain can actually process, that's more than 50,000 cars. At once, you could stack large naval vessels on this guy's shoulders, and he'd basically shrug. He's not just tall, he's functionally a walking construction crane the size of a city block. And that's what makes Metroplex special in these conversations. Most characters at this tier get vague descriptions. He's really big. He towers over everything. Cool, helpful. Metroplex actually has numbers. A height in feet, a weight capacity in tons, a strength rating of 10 out of 10. For a franchise that treats consistent scaling like a polite suggestion, having concrete data is almost suspicious. Now here's the thing that surprises people. Despite being in the same CityBot class as Fortress Maximus, his original G1 toy only stands about 28 centimeters tall. Fortress Maximus? 55 centimeters. That's nearly double the height. Same category, same era, and Fort Max is looking down at him like he's a deluxe class figure who wandered into the wrong aisle. In fiction, they're treated as peers. In plastic, it's not even close. His alt modes tell the full story of what he's supposed to be. A city, a battle station, and a towering humanoid robot. 3 modes, all of them massive. All of them designed to make smaller Autobots feel like they're living inside their teammate, which technically they are. But if you think that toy size gap is just a quirk, wait until you meet the bot on the other side of it. Fortress Maximus. If Metroplex set the standard for what a CityBot could be, Fortress Maximus looked at that standard and said, that's cute. Because Fort Max didn't just compete with Metroplex. He made him look like an action figure you'd find in a Happy Meal. Here's the thing. The original G1 Fortress Maximus toy stands at 22 inches tall. That's 56 centimeters. Over half a meter of plastic. At the time of release, it was the 3rd tallest Transformer toy ever produced, and it became the benchmark against which every single city-class figure was measured for years. You didn't ask, is this toy big? You asked, is it bigger than Fort Max? And the answer was almost always no. But the real fun starts when you compare him to the bot he's most often paired with. In the comics, Fortress Maximus is described as 200 feet tall. That's the exact same height as Metroplex's tech spec. Same number, same scale. They're supposed to be equals in fiction. Cool. Except toy-wise, Fort Max stands at 55 centimeters while Metroplex clocks in at 28. That's nearly double. So in canon, they're the same height, and on your shelf, one of them is literally towering over the other like an older brother holding a basketball over a toddler's head. The Transformers franchise and consistent scaling, everybody, best friends forever. And his city mode is somehow even more ridiculous. We're talking 30 centimeters tall, 55 centimeters long, and 42 centimeters wide. That's not a toy, that's a piece of furniture. You could serve dinner on this thing. Smaller figures don't just stand next to Fort Max in city mode, they move into him. They've got rooms, they've got ramps, they've got what is essentially a Transformer suburb. Owning the original Fort Max meant dedicating an entire shelf to a single toy. It meant explaining to your parents why a robot needed that much real estate. It was the collector's holy grail, the one figure that separated casual fans from people who had genuinely reorganized their living space around Transformers. But Fort Max, for all his record-setting plastic, still isn't the strongest guardian the Autobots ever deployed. That title belongs to something older, angrier, and built like a rocket launch pad with anger issues. Omega Supreme. Omega Supreme is the short king of giant Transformers, and I mean that with absolute respect. See, everything we've talked about so far has been measured in hundreds of feet. Citybots, fortresses, walking metropolises. Omega Supreme? His G1 tech spec lists him at 75 feet tall. That's roughly 23 meters. Some sources actually put him even lower at 18 meters, which is about 59 feet. Either way, he's significantly shorter than Metroplex, shorter than Fortress Maximus, shorter than basically every Citybot on this list. But here's the thing. His lifting capacity is 300,000 tons. Let that sink in for a second. Metroplex, the 200-foot walking city, can lift 70,000 tons. Omega Supreme, standing at less than half his height, can lift over 4 times that amount. He's not just stronger pound for pound, he's stronger by an absurd margin. This is like finding out your 5.6 coworker can deadlift a cruise ship. The mechanical density packed into this robot's frame is genuinely ridiculous, and his role reflects that raw power. Omega Supreme isn't a frontline fighter. He's the guy they keep in reserve, the emergency option, the break glass in case of existential threat Autobot. His alt modes are a rocket base, a tank, and a defense platform, because apparently one apocalypse prevention vehicle wasn't enough. He needed 3. Now, if you think 75 feet is his ceiling, Transformers Animated would like a word. In that continuity, Omega Supreme is described as being dozens of times taller than even the tallest Autobots. The tallest Autobots in Animated are roughly 6 to 8 meters. Dozens of times that puts him potentially in the hundreds of meters, which is, a slight upgrade from 23 meters. So, depending on which version you're looking at, Omega Supreme is either a compact powerhouse who could bench press a mountain range, or a skyscraper-sized guardian who makes Citybots look like action figures. Either way, he's earned more respect than his height would suggest. But if you think one impossibly strong combatant is impressive, wait until you see what happens when 5 Decepticons merge into a single Predator. Predaking, the combined form of the Predacons. 5 Decepticons walk into a bar. Razorclaw, Rampage, Dive Bomb, Headstrong, and Tantrum. They don't order drinks. They stack on top of each other and become the single most terrifying combiner the Decepticons ever fielded. Predaking isn't just another Gestalt. He's the apex predator of the combiner world, and that's not fan hype. That's literally how the fiction treats him. Where most combiners suffer from the whole 5 minds crammed into one body problem and end up stumbling around like a confused skyscraper, Predaking is eerily coordinated, almost intelligent. Which is, not ideal if you're on the other side of the battlefield. But here's where it gets genuinely interesting, and it has nothing to do with lore. It has to do with a tape measure. A representative Predaking figure stands 20 inches tall to the head. That's about 50.8 centimeters of pure combined Decepticon nonsense. But measured to the tip of his back-mounted gun, and you hit 24 inches. That's 61 centimeters. Why does that matter? Because the legendary Fortress Maximus toy, one of the tallest Transformer toys ever made, stands at 56 centimeters. 5 guys in a trench coat beating the actual city. Nobody talks about this enough. Now, in-universe, the math gets more grounded. Using standard toy scaling ratios, Predaking's fictional height lands somewhere around 15 to 20 meters. Tall enough to look down on basically every standard Transformer, but not quite Citybot territory. He's in that sweet spot where he's the biggest guy in most rooms, but still has to look up at Metroplex. And of course, the fan community has opinions. There's a whole debate about whether gun tip and wing measurements should count toward a figure's height, or whether only head height matters. Some collectors insist 20 inches is the real number. Others argue that if the gun is permanently mounted and sticking straight up, it counts. It's the kind of argument that has genuinely gone on for years, and honestly, I don't know what to tell you. But whether you measure to the head or the gun, Predaking earns his crown as king of the Combiners, at least until you meet the one who started it all, and he's got a very different construction theme going on. Devastator, the combined form of the Constructicons. Every franchise has its original, the one that set the standard before anyone even knew there was a standard to set. For Combiners, that's Devastator. 6 Constructicons locked together into one giant green wrecking machine, and when he first showed up in G1, nobody had seen anything like it. He wasn't just a big robot, he was the big robot. The one that made every kid watching think, wait, they can just do that? And here's the thing about Devastator that separates him from a lot of the Combiners we've talked about. We can actually pin down how tall he is with unusual precision. Most Combiners exist in this frustrating fog of, well, he looks pretty big in that one episode, but then he's weirdly small 3 episodes later. Devastator, thanks to the Siege toy line, gets something close to a definitive answer. The Siege line operates at approximately 133.5 scale for robot modes. At that ratio, a properly scaled Devastator figure stands 47 centimeters tall, just barely edging out his Combiner Wars version by about a centimeter. Now, run that 47 centimeters back through the scale ratio, and you get an in-universe height of roughly 15.7 meters. That's a 5-story building, walking around, made of dump trucks and cement mixers. Let that sink in for a second. Every component of Devastator is a piece of heavy construction equipment. Excavators, mixers, cranes. So when he combines, he's not just tall, he's essentially a walking demolition site with opinions. The kind of thing you'd see tearing down a condemned apartment complex, except the apartment complex is also him, and he's angry about it. The fact that we can derive a quasi-canonical height estimate at all is genuinely unusual for Combiners. Most of them just get vague visual scaling that changes depending on who drew the frame that week. Devastator gets math, actual repeatable math, and that math says he's roughly the height of buildings he'd be designed to construct in his day job. Which is, poetic in the most destructive way possible. He's the benchmark, the original Gestalt. Every Combiner that came after him exists in his shadow, and at 5 stories tall, that shadow covers a lot of ground. But speaking of Combiners living in Devastator's shadow, let's talk about one that's arguably even more unstable than a tower of construction vehicles held together by sheer Decepticon stubbornness. Menasor, the combined form of the Stunticons. Menasor is what happens when you combine 5 Decepticon cars with the emotional stability of a toddler who missed nap time. He's the Gestalt form of the Stunticons, a combiner themed entirely around speed, road warfare, and being psychologically unhinged. And honestly, trying to pin down his actual size is about as chaotic as the character himself. Here's the thing, unlike some other entries on this list, Menasor doesn't have a clean tech spec height sitting in a database somewhere. There's no official document that says Menasor is exactly this many meters tall, please stop asking. Instead, the fan community has collectively agreed on a target. That target is about 12 inches, roughly 30 centimeters, for his combined toy form. Many modern figures land within that range, which is nice. Very orderly, very un-Menasor. Now, if you take that 30 centimeter figure and run it through standard scaling ratios, somewhere around 130 to 133, you get an in-universe height of roughly 9 to 10 meters. That's a 3-story building that hates you, and also can't stop arguing with its own legs. His design sells the height too. Pronounced shoulder structures, extended leg proportions, and a head crest that adds vertical presence, all giving him this angular silhouette that looks taller than it technically is. But the real kicker is that the evidence for any of these numbers is thin. Most height discussions for Menasor rely on community preferences and toy comparisons rather than anything resembling official data. Fans basically looked at Devastator, looked at Menasor, and said, yeah, those two should probably be the same height. Which, to be fair, is as valid a methodology as anything Hasbro has offered. It's fitting, really. The most mentally unstable combiner in the franchise also has the most unstable size classification. Nobody can agree on how tall he is because even he doesn't know. But if Menasor's size is hard to nail down, the next entry has the opposite problem. Scorponok is very large, very measurable, and very difficult to ignore. Scorponok. Most of the giant transformers we've talked about so far have one thing in common. They're tall. You look up, you see a big robot, you understand the threat. Scorponok doesn't work like that. Scorponok makes you question what big even means, because his size isn't about how high he stands. It's about how much space he takes up in every direction. Scorponok is a high-ranking Decepticon whose alt modes include a massive mechanical scorpion and a towering base structure, putting him firmly in the Titan or Citybot category. His G1 toy stands around 2 feet tall in robot form, roughly 61 centimeters. That's taller than some Fortress Maximus releases. That's a toy the size of a small toddler just standing on your shelf, judging you. Extrapolating from that 61-centimeter toy using standard 130 to 133 scale ratios gives you an in-universe height somewhere around 18 to 20 meters, multi-story building territory. But that number only tells half the story, because the moment Scorponok drops into Scorpion mode, the math changes completely. His Scorpion form stretches out horizontally with extensive limb structures, a weaponized tail, and a footprint that rivals his vertical height in robot mode. He's not just tall, he's wide, he's long. You don't fight Scorponok, you fight the entire area code he happens to be occupying, and this is where the fan debate gets heated. Characters like Metroplex and Fortress Maximus transform into cities with roads, hangars, and docking bays. They're infrastructure. Scorponok's base mode has platforms and functional areas. Sure, but his Scorpion mode blurs the line between character and environment. He's too big to be a regular Decepticon. He's too mobile and predatory to be a city. He's basically a forward operating base that decided it wanted to stab things. Some fans put him in the same tier as Fortress Maximus. Others say he's a large base transformer, not a proper city bot. Both sides have a point, which is probably why the argument has been going on for decades. But if Scorponok's size is hard to classify, the next entry has the opposite problem. Everyone knows exactly how big Galvatron is supposed to be. The issue is that nobody agrees on which version counts. Galvatron, in his largest toy continuity depictions, Galvatron is the odd one out on this list, and I'm fully aware of that. But hear me out, because his inclusion actually proves something important about how the Transformers franchise thinks about size. So here's the setup. Megatron gets absolutely destroyed, rebuilt from scratch by Unicron, a being whose body is literally a planet, and the end result is a guy who's roughly the same height as Megatron, maybe slightly bulkier, broader shoulders, a bigger cannon, but in terms of raw vertical measurement, he's standing eye to eye with Optimus Prime. That's the upgrade. You'd think getting personally reformatted by a planet-sized god of destruction would come with at least a few extra stories of height, but no. Unicron had the entire mass of a celestial object to work with and went, yeah, let's keep him about the same size, but give him a purple paint job and angrier eyebrows. Cool. His biggest toy depictions sit in the leader class range, generally around 20 to 25 centimeters. For context, that puts him well below Titan class figures. He's not even in the same zip code as Fortress Maximus or Scorponok on a shelf, and the evidence for his bigness is genuinely thin. Almost zero explicit canonical height statements. No tech specs listing him at some dramatic new measurement. No scene where he towers over a building he didn't tower over before. His size upgrade is almost entirely conceptual. He hits harder, he's more durable, he's meaner, but he's not measurably taller in any meaningful way, which is exactly why he's here. Galvatron is proof that in Transformers, biggest doesn't always mean most meters. He's the most powerful reformat in the series, handed down by a literal god, and he came out the other side the same size as a truck. But if Galvatron represents the smallest version of big on this list, the next entry swings hard in the opposite direction, because the Guardian robots don't mess around with subtlety. The Guardian robots, Titans return. So we've covered Planet Eaters, City Bots, Combiners, and everything in between. But there's one category left that breaks the entire concept of big wide open. The Guardian robots. In the broader Transformers lore, Guardian robots are massive Titan-class sentinels whose entire purpose is to guard key locations, orbital platforms, and strategic sites. Think living fortresses that don't just stand near a city. They are the city, or the space station, or the planetary defense grid. Here's where it gets interesting. With every other entry on this list, we've been able to talk about height, feet, meters, toy measurements, tech specs. Even when the numbers were messy, there was at least a number to argue about. Guardian robots don't really work that way. Their Titan-class toys stand in the 45 to 60 centimeter range, sure. But in fiction, these things tower above cityscapes, operating as orbital structures measured in hundreds of meters. Some interpretations push them even further. You're not looking up at a Guardian robot the way you look up at a building, you're inside one. You're standing on its shoulder and realizing the floor you're walking on has a heartbeat, and that's the detail that ties this entire video together. At the extreme end of Transformers scale, the line between character and building disappears entirely. Guardian robots are living architecture. Their size isn't measured in feet or meters. It's measured in the environments they define. The platforms smaller Transformers walk across without even realizing they're standing on someone's ribcage. Now, the evidence for their specific size is thin. Most of what we know comes from analogy with other Titan-class figures and from visual depictions that vary wildly across continuities. But that almost makes them a more fitting end to this list, because once you reach the point where a Transformer's body functions as infrastructure, where its alt mode is an entire orbital defense platform, asking how tall is it kind of stops being the right question. The right question is, What does it even mean to be big when you're a sentient fortress? When your hallways have hallways? Every entry on this list has pushed that question further. From Unicron literally being a planet, to Metroplex housing an entire faction, to Devastator proving that 5 construction vehicles can stack into something terrifying, but Guardian robots are where the franchise finally stops pretending there's a meaningful difference between a character and a place. They're both. They've always been both. And that's the wildest thing about Transformers Scale. It doesn't end at really tall. It ends at you're standing inside a living god, and you didn't even notice. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.